Hi everyone, I'm Scarlet with Bloomberg Television. Welcome to the latest edition of our Cornell Tech at Bloomberg speaker series, where I sit down with leading figures in technology, global technology at that, entrepreneurs, investors, as well as thinkers. Now, our aim is to bring you smart conversations to produce new insights and raise compelling questions. If you want to catch up on our prior episodes, you can do so by checking out the Inside Bloomberg page on YouTube. You can also stream us on our podcast, Cornell Tech at Bloomberg, which is, of course, available on all major platforms. In this month's edition, I'm pleased to welcome Lisa Lewin. She is the newly appointed CEO of General Assembly. GA was originally a coding boot camp that has since grown into a behemoth, a global education organization that offers in-demand skills as well as professional upskilling. It is owned by the Swiss HR company Adecco. Lisa has an education and technologist background. She was co-founder and managing partner of Ethical Ventures, which is a change management consulting firm that helps leaders build organizations with a positive impact on society. That was just prior to joining General Assembly. And before all of that, she worked at Pearson and McGraw-Hill Education. Lisa, it's so great to speak with you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me to be here.
So I usually start with your career path and, what kind of brought you to the point that you're at now. For you specifically, your career path has this recurring theme of education. Your mom was a teacher, and I read that she was the one who taught you how to read. You went on to study marketing and international business at WashU in St. Louis. After college, you worked in market research at NPD Group. Was it your intention to work in education, to return to education?
Great question. It wasn't at first, right? So you mentioned that I actually started my career in data and technology, which I really enjoyed because I always had, I was always very left brain and right brain. I had a creative streak. I was a former drama kid, but I was also, really, really strong in math. And so, being able to sort of tell stories and really understand business insights using market research was kind of a way of getting the creative side, because it was very marketing leaning, and also getting my quant kicks. And so, had a great run at the NPD Group and really developed, my chops in data and research and analytics and tech. Then went to business school, and as much fun as I had bringing my skills to, food and beverage and consumer packaged goods, which was the industry that I spent, those pre-B school years in, I just really felt like I wanted to make my career in a place where I could truly have impact. And if I looked at my own life, education is that place that really offers true generational social mobility. And I'd experienced that in my own family. My great-grandparents had at most an 8th grade education, and within 2 generations, my parents and their siblings all had advanced degrees and had climbed the socioeconomic ladder through education. And I wanted to be able to bring my data and tech and strategy skills that I had developed to an industry where I could really have impact and work for mission-driven organizations.
Now, you went to HBS, as you mentioned, and whenever someone goes to business school, the summer internship is critical. You worked at Boston Consulting Group as your summer internship. Afterwards, as a newly minted MBA, you joined McGraw-Hill. We usually see people use their MBAs to transition from one career path to another, often to consulting, to technology, to banking. In your case, you went the opposite way. You went from consulting, which was during the summer, and you went to education. What gave you the conviction to go away from those popular fields to education?
Sure. I think it was the combination of a few things. So first, I did have all of these data and research and consulting skills at that point, and was lucky enough, even though I was graduating into a bit of a tough job environment, 2003 for those old enough to remember, was really coming off of the era of the huge sort of scandals, ethical scandals with Enron and Arthur Andersen, and the job market had not fully recovered in that moment. And so I was really, really lucky and had a number of offers from the big, kind of white glove consulting firms. But, as I said before, I really felt that while I loved strategy and feel like I'm a strategist at heart, I really wanted to go into a field where I could have impact. And McGraw-Hill, the education company, like all publishers, educational publishers at the time, were just the beginning of kind of digital transformation and thinking in really dynamic ways about how to bring data and technology to bear on things like increasing student achievement and growing learner outcomes. And that felt like a good ride to get on for a number of reasons, but mostly because, again, I wanted to use my skills to doing something that I thought would have true impact. And I've been in the education field for the most part ever since.
Yeah, McGraw-Hill and then Pearson, these are kind of two old school education names in that space. Talk a little bit about what you did there. And you mentioned that they were just starting to realize the magic, the abilities that technology can really bring to their business. How much did they rely on technology? How much technology did they utilize at the time that you joined?
Sure. I mean, then it was largely at the beginning, right? I mean, this was a time in the early aughts, if you will, where textbooks were still the biggest product driver for a lot of these education companies, and they had just moved into an era where sort of homework systems were starting to get attached in like CD-ROMs that were vacuum packed to books, and then that later became software driven and internet driven education products, education technology. And so, I feel like I've really been lucky in having a front row seat at seeing from multiple perspectives, certainly from the publisher perspective, from the educator perspective, the ways in which tech has really transformed teaching and learning, and done that at every stage. Done that, certainly at the K-12 education stage, certainly done that in college and post-secondary education, and is thoroughly transforming even corporate training, which is really the space that GA plays in.
Yeah, you mentioned textbooks. I think about how $100 textbooks, at least, are just dying to be disrupted because that can't go on. Whenever we talk to people, entrepreneurs at Cornell Tech at Bloomberg, they all stress how education is this legacy industry that's very resistant to adopt or embrace technology or to be disrupted. Do you find that this has been the case?
I think it depends on what part of the space you're talking about, right? So, I think that the last 20 years has seen, a huge amount of both disruption and innovation and entrepreneurship. GA certainly being, one shining example of that. Where I think there is a lot of creativity and thought being put into how to deliver really high quality teaching and learning at scale. I think there are, great experiments happening all over the world at how do you bring a high quality educational opportunity to everyone that needs it. Where I think there has been a real challenge and why there's still a tremendous amount of opportunity for disruption ahead is that if you look at, say, as you mentioned, the price of a college education, there's still a fundamental problem there where when people go to get a degree, it's with an expectation that degree, that high price degree that they're paying for is going to put them on a lifelong career path to a high wage job. And that promise, that sort of guarantee that if you pay for college education, that you'll have some degree of economic security and career stability, has really been disrupted in every way, in large part because the return on that investment has been questioned, right? The debt that students are graduating with, and then finding themselves underemployed relative to that investment has called all of that into question. And even in this COVID moment, when students are sending in those tuition checks to have an experience that where, here in the pandemic, they're, largely sort of, sidelined and taking online courses from inside their dorm rooms, is once again asking people to call into question what's really going on here, and how do we ensure that when people are investing in their education, they're getting the outcomes that they want and expect from it. So that's a way of saying that I think there's certainly been a lot of innovation, but there's still quite a lot of innovation ahead.
Yeah, very well said. The stakes are so high because the cost is so high. The investment cost is so massive that you really need to get something out of it. I want to, obviously, there's a lot to mine there, but I want to go back to you and General Assembly, because I read that you first encountered General Assembly actually as a student who took some classes. Tell us how that happened. I believe it was after you started your own company, right? What class did you take at General Assembly?
I did. Long before becoming CEO, GA found its way into my professional life. So the first example of that was when I left McGraw-Hill. It was to start my own ed tech company. And as I'm sure other entrepreneurs remember these days, sometimes you're the chief cook and bottle washer. So I was actually doing some of my own coding, and also, really just teaching myself, because as you had said, my skills were in, data and tech and in marketing, but not necessarily in things like human-centered product design. And so the fact that I could go to GA and also visit, its super cool campuses and be with other like-minded, tech-forward entrepreneurs, it was just a great way to kind of top up my skills that I needed to be successful at starting my own company. And then, several years later, when I was running the global higher ed product team at Pearson, overseeing, over 1,000 technologists, learning technologists, I would send staff to GA to learn, to upskill and reskill, and ensure that the staff that I led had the digital skills that they needed to really be successful and effective. So I was a huge fangirl of GA, even before I got the call last year that Jake, who I know is a friend of yours as well, had decided to sort of move on, and that they were looking for a leader to drive the next chapter of the company.
Yeah, it certainly helps that you knew the product and you knew the venue and you had a good understanding of who the customer was. So you mentioned that you sent a lot of your own sent a lot of your team members, your staff members, to take classes at GA. I believe you said that you believe there was positive ROI, return on investment, in going to GA classes and taking GA classes. Was there any way, I mean, you're a quant person, was there any way for you to measure that?
Oh, sure. I mean, it was very easy to measure just in their sort of productivity coming back from those programs. Here's the thing about tech: it's constantly changing. So just because you are fresh with those skills, today, means that you aren't necessarily as up to date a year from now, just because of the speed of change. So think about, just in the course of the last 2 years, how much has changed in artificial intelligence and in machine learning. Those are the kinds of things that end up being a drag on large enterprises' abilities to compete and to innovate. And think of in a time, now, for example, when years worth of digital transformation has occurred over a matter of months. Companies are looking at their workforce and thinking, do I have the skill set among my employees to really be able to move as quickly and in as agile a way and as innovative a way as we need to survive. And so, as I learned back then when I was, managing my own large digital teams, and as I certainly believe today, putting that kind of investment in upskilling and reskilling your staff has both an immediate and a long-term payout.
All right, sounds good. You mentioned Jake Schwartz. He, of course, is the co-founder of General Assembly, and you succeeded him last summer. Wait, this is 2021, last summer of 2020. The years just melt into one another.
Every day is Blur's day, as they say.
Exactly. What was it like to take over from someone who's so closely defined with the company? I mean, he's got such a long and intimate history with the company. He's kind of the personification of it. He laid out the vision for it. I mean, how do you carve your own path there? And do you feel like your vision is different from his vision?
It's such a great question. So first, if Jake sees this, hey Jake, he's such an iconic character because he created such a gem in the industry. GA really innovated and really helped establish and put the whole boot camp model on the map, reinventing what tech education could look like. And so, he deserves so much credit, as do his fellow founders and the incredible team that they had behind them at creating such an incredible and durable company and franchise. And so, following a founder is always, that's always going to be a hard act to follow, but every company reaches a stage where, maybe it's ready for the next generation of leadership. And there are qualities that Jake has that I don't, and certainly qualities that I have that Jake would probably say that he doesn't have. And sometimes that's really good. Sometimes it's really good as a company is thinking about charting its future, to shake things up a little bit. And so, I'm forging my own path with this incredible team of people, and we have some really big ambitions. This is a different moment than when GA was established. When GA started, the sort of problem to be solved was, young people wanting to get access to, to hot tech industries and maybe begin their own startups. And we certainly still have people who come to us for that. But now, now the demands are a little, and the problems to be solved are a little bit different. Now it's, folks who are looking again for that opportunity for kind of social mobility, who maybe, don't have a full college degree, or maybe it's, folks who don't have skills to access the millions of open digital jobs around the world. And so that's what our sights are set on. It's really, first of all, becoming much more global. And ensuring that everyone around the world can have access to this kind of opportunity. Second, really doubling down on impact and ensuring that, when people join us, that what they're coming out with is a set of marketable skills and a job. And three, to really grow the global talent pool of technologists, because as you know, there's a big demand and supply challenge right now in tech, where there are more jobs open and that number is growing every day than there are people with the tech and digital skills to fill those jobs. And that's really what we're focused on.
Yeah, the skills mismatch is something that has been persistent over the last couple of years. I'm glad you mentioned the boot camp part of it, because I remember when I spoke with Jake back in November of 2017, General Assembly was still very much a coding boot camp. That was how it was known throughout New York. The range of classes has clearly grown beyond that. What's your most popular class right now, Lisa?
Sure. I mean, right now, our software engineering, what we call our immersive, is still our most popular full-time offering. And, and a lot of that is because the number of software developer roles has just continued to grow. It even grew, all of last year, even amidst during a surging unemployment in almost every other sector. So, that continues to be really, really our strongest and most popular area. I'll also say, if you look beyond kind of, the programs like data and engineering, we also have seen a tremendously strong growth in our what we call our consumer business, which is where individuals come to us to go through some accelerated program, a boot camp or a part-time program, and we had a really big increase in that. In fact, and it peaked really in the first half of 2020 when COVID was peaking, and we think that and we know that that's because for folks, at least folks that don't have kids, there was just more time. A lot of folks had more time on their hand to invest in their own education, and then a number of people also, unfortunately, were furloughed during COVID and used that as a moment to really think about how do they top up their skills. So all of our programs really saw some growth with those core coding skills and software engineering still being the most sought.
How big are these classes? I mean, especially if there are people coming in all of a sudden at the start of the pandemic that you may not have been anticipating. I mean, can you scale the classes quickly?
Sure. I mean, one of the things that I think has been really a big transformation for GA is, as you know, pre-pandemic, we were really largely known for our in-person, on-campus courses. GA has always offered, at least for the last 5 years or so, some remote offerings, but really most of our experience was so focused in that campus experience within those four walls, where there's literally a physical limit on the number of people that you can that we can hold in a class. And the pandemic really forced us to rapidly pivot to an all remote format practically overnight, and it was really important to us to do that without sacrificing on quality. And so, while we were previously, we'll call it campus first, the present and the future of GA is really a truly hybrid model where we're able to blend in-person instruction and flexible remote coursework. And that, allows us to extend, say, a popular instructor and allow them to teach a course and teach a class of folks that may be on the other side of the country. So that's one of the ways in which we've been able to kind of build up capacity to meet demand.
Right. But as schools have to go remote, virtual, or at least add this hybrid component, certainly at the higher education level, a lot of people say that that's not worth the same as paying for in-class learning. Does that crimp your ability to charge for these classes? I mean, what does the cost structure look like as you go fully remote versus the in-person, in-class learning that happened before?
Sure. Well, I mean, one of the things that's very different about us that may be a little bit different than higher ed is, higher ed is sort of, a crowning example of sort of, a lot of fixed physical costs, right? Because there are sprawling campuses that sort of have to be maintained. And so, they really have to think about sort of, physical, utilization of physical real estate. For us, even though the campus was profoundly, was a big part of GA's sort of brand. Ultimately, the value that we're delivering wasn't inside those physical four walls. The value that we were delivering was really, really high quality, super relevant digital skills, student support, career coaching, and and help with getting a job. Right, our outcomes, the job placements, which we internally describe as outcomes, is the thing that we are laser focused on, ensuring that people who come and are willing to dedicate and devote, 12 weeks of their lives with us to get access to a new career, that we deliver on that promise. And so all of that support, the career coaching support, the student success support, the quality instruction, the up to the minute curriculum, those are things that we fortunately have shown that we're able to continue to deliver with a high quality experience. even in this remote environment. And in fact, in this moment, we've seen our customer satisfaction actually increase in this moment. So, and I think that that's a testament because we've really worked hard to try to maintain that experience, even as it shifted from physical to remote.
This is going to be an overly broad question, but how do you, what types of jobs do you help students obtain? Does General Assembly help students get? I mean, is it something that they wouldn't have been able to get before because they didn't study engineering and they didn't have that STEM background? Can I go from a history major to someone who can get a job in software and engineering and development just through a course at General Assembly?
Yes, I mean, I think that's what you're describing is exactly the magic of not only GA, but this sort of accelerated program or boot camp model is that it was designed to do exactly that. In fact, one of the original kind of core target markets for GA in its earliest days was that liberal arts major, that liberal arts graduate who wanted to be able to be a UX designer. And so, the curriculum and the programs are designed to do exactly that. It's how do you create a really immersive and intensive experience over this focused period of time, and create cohorts of students that are not just learning from the instructor, but also from the practice and the work that they're doing, and from each other. How do you create that sort of environment where after that intensive period, people are really leaving with marketable skills that can be applied on day one of the job? And we certainly do that in software engineering, but we also do that in UX design. We do that in product management. Data has been one of the areas that's been growing the fastest for GA. So that's really our sweet spot is delivering an experience that allows people to, again, upskill and reskill in those tech and digital spaces so that they can apply them on the job.
And because you're so focused on outcome, you're really able to incorporate the feedback that you get from the employers, the future employers, in terms of what kind of classes you can offer. If I were to go in there and take one of the courses to try to get a job in technology, what percentage of students are like me, where I pay out of pocket to kind of increase my odds of getting a new job versus someone who gets sent by their company to just upskill what they do have in their portfolio?
Sure. Well, it's interesting that you did talk about employers, because employers and enterprises have become a larger and larger part of our business generally. We were talking earlier about how, the sort of just speed of digital transformation, particularly in this moment of the pandemic, has just been absolutely breathtaking. And even before that, just the pace of technological change was moving at breakneck speed. And so, employers, we have an entire enterprise business that is focused on employers who want to, upskill and reskill cohorts of their own employees to give them these sorts of skills. And we do some really highly contextualized, customized work with many of the Fortune 1000, helping them upskill certainly in software engineering, but increasingly in data, as I shared. So we're really, really focused on workforce transformation, while at the same time, our consumer side of the business is helping those individuals who want to take their career trajectory in their own hands, and helping those folks get access to a new career as well.
So is that consumer enterprise split 50-50, 40-60, 10-90?
Sure. Right now, about a little over 2/3 of our business, almost 70% of our business, is still on that consumer side. But it's actually the enterprise side of our business that over the last few years has grown the fastest.
Got it. Given that 2/3 of your customers are students who are paying out of pocket, does that limit who's able to access your classes?
Well, it used to. When we were only really able to cater to individuals who were paying out of pocket and doing self-pay, that certainly did put a limit on who we were able to really reach. But I think one of the innovations in the space that I think has on balance net been really good is the innovation and development of more what we call consumer financing options. And those include opportunities where folks can come and enjoy and complete these programs and pay once they've actually received a job. And so being able to sort of offer that kind of financing has allowed us to give people who may not quite have enough in the bank right now, but are just as deserving of having an opportunity like this to transform their career, that chance to do just that.
Yeah, there's also these income sharing agreements, ISAs, where students pay back a certain percentage of their post-program salaries for a certain period of time.
Exactly.
Do you think we'll see these kinds of innovations, what you're referring to, the ISAs, replace traditional student loans at places like traditional four-year colleges? I mean, you offer a compelling product and you're able to offer terms that are more aligned with what a lot of people want. Is this something that threatens to replace the traditional student loan?
It's a great question. I honestly think only time will tell. And with the students as you describe them that we're catering to are often older and aren't necessarily your college age students. So we're not in that same space as kind of higher education. Where they've really got where there really is a question about sort of student debt. And how heavy it has become, and how there are students that are graduating from college with such significant debt that it really delays their ability to make investments that, like in homes, for example, that would have been very, very common a generation before. So on the college side, on the higher ed side, it is very, very clear that there's still a lot of room for transformation of student financing. And I know that there are certainly conversations happening in that sector around whether or not this idea of the income share might be one of the ways to think about that. But ultimately, the real issue is the cost of higher education. Financing it is one thing, but I think it's the real fundamental question is what must be done to really sort of change the entire cost structure of higher ed so that that opportunity can be more affordable.
Absolutely. You said it so well. So I want to tie that in with how a lot of your students are perhaps older students, those who have had full-fledged careers and are looking for a change. Are you seeing a lot more of your students skew younger, perhaps people who have deferred going to college or are taking a break from college right now because of the pandemic? I mean, COVID has disrupted everything, and I imagine for you guys as well, it's helped you in the beginning, but are you seeing a different kind of student emerge as a result?
Sure. I mean, in COVID, what we're seeing more of is people that have been furloughed, right? So so adults that are certainly past college age who find that when you think about entire industries, retail, hospitality, tourism, I mean, there are entire job categories that are going extinct or are at the very least severely impacted. And so that's really where we're seeing a big difference is, people who find themselves not just furloughed from a company, but where their entire sector has really been impacted, and they've got, and maybe they have families and they've got to figure out how to make their way to a higher paying career and fast. So really, it's that demographic that we're starting to see an increase with.
Okay. I guess I'm asking for selfish reasons as well. I've got a senior in high school right now who's applying to colleges, and at $80,000 a year, probably 90,000 by the time he actually gets to school. It just doesn't seem like it's worth it unless he can get a good job coming out of it. And maybe he'll be able to do that with an engineering degree, but maybe it makes more sense for him to go to something like General Assembly. How much would I spend for him to get the equivalent of an engineering bachelor's degree at General Assembly? Is that possible?
Mhm. Well, that's actually a really interesting question. If you're talking about kind of, getting, certain skills, job skills, I do think that accelerated programs and boot camps are a really high value and compelling way to do that. But if you're talking about your son who's in high school, there are certain things that college does that even an accelerated and boot camp program does. I mean, if you think about what college does, it's not about just skills, right? It's about how do you take an 18-year-old and sort of give them the critical thinking skills, the social skills, the sort of space for experimentation and growth, and make them decent citizens and engaged learners in the world. You're not going to get that necessarily in a 12-week boot camp. So I would definitely say that for looking for job ready skills, we are very, very proud of the programs that we've been able to produce that do just that for people at every stage, because it's not just about going to and getting a single degree at the beginning of your life. It's about really continuing to keep your skills up to date over your life. Lifelong skill building that keeps up with the pace of technology. But I still think that there is very much a place for college and university education, just in terms of giving young people a good start on their life path.
Okay, you ruined my plan to save $300,000 over the next couple of years.
Well, the price I can't defend, but
you can. You mentioned job ready skills. How much do you think employers are increasingly demanding or wanting soft skills, communication skills? You mentioned critical thinking skills that kids develop in college. I mean, those are things that people can always use an upgrade of, a refresher of, but soft skills, the ability to communicate abstract concepts with your peers, with your colleagues, with your managers. Do you see that as something that employers are increasingly demanding, and that's something that you can offer in your programs?
So I absolutely think that those skills are critical and increasingly critical. We are more connected than ever. Industries are more competitive and require more innovation. And now we're on the precipice of the future of work that's requiring all of us to figure out how to do things like build teams and create inclusive environments, when most of us are sitting at home and interacting only with our device all day, with our laptops and desktops all day. So I think for all those reasons, those soft skills are going to continue to be incredibly important. We at GA are very, very focused on this global problem of closing the tech and digital skills gap. And so the way that we think about soft skills is, how do you embed, whether in the career coaching, in the instruction, in the kind of, the student success work that we provide to students, how do you, in those kind of adjacent areas, ensure that those soft skills are part of the conversation and getting included, because they're certainly going to be increasingly in demand.
Going back to your prior job, your prior life, where you were managing partner at Ethical Ventures, you were helping companies and leaders build organizations with a positive impact on society. I know you've talked about how software engineers in general don't have a universal set of standards the way that, say, doctors in the medical industry do, because the industry is just not there yet. It's not as mature. but you're in a position to perhaps change that. Does General Assembly have a set of standards or ethics that that you try to instill in your students the way that perhaps you would think about when you're at Ethical Ventures?
I think every player in the technology space has got to be thinking about tech ethics. There is no question that technology is completely, to state the obvious, is completely ubiquitous in our lives. And increasingly, particularly when you think about things like AI, there are unfortunate opportunities that as developers build and develop products, that our own very human failings and biases can end up getting literally coded into the technology that we use. So I think, everyone that's thinking about and considers themselves a technologist, whether those are, tech education providers like us, but more importantly, tech companies that are building and developing our technology products, they've really got to be thinking about taking, human-centered and ethical approaches to product design, ensuring that, sort of tech ethics ends up getting, centered into the conversation, because the alternative is a pretty scary one.
And some people might say that we're looking at the alternative right now. I noticed, Lisa, that you're not on Twitter. You're also not on Facebook, and I'm guessing you're not on Instagram either. You've talked a lot in the past about big tech and the ethics that they need to display more of, the need perhaps to regulate them as well, the way that the government regulated big oil in the past. How do you think about government regulation of big technology and what that means for companies like General Assembly, which is training the next generation of technologists?
I do participate in some social media. Well, actually, I don't know if LinkedIn is considered social. It's quite social, but
it's very serious social media.
It's exactly, that's right. But I did take a bit of a moratorium, particularly in the run up to the U.S. elections. I did take a moratorium from social media for a couple of reasons. One, because just for mental health reasons, I'm already a prolific reader of news, and that never changed. But the way that content was starting to get served up to me in some of these platforms was honestly just a challenge to my ability to sort of stay zen during the day and focused. But then the other, which you alluded to, is it just kind of got a little harder to defend there for a while. For someone who cares deeply about not just tech ethics, but also about the health of democracy, and not just our democracy here in the U.S., but democracy around the world. It just was getting harder to defend what at least at the time, a year and a half, 2 years ago, was a bit of obliviousness among some of the really large tech players about the role that they were playing in our civic life. I do think that is changing. I don't think we're at perfect yet, but I'm holding out hope that there will be enough transformative change that I'll be able to rejoin less serious social media.
All right. In the meantime, you can find Lisa on LinkedIn. Lisa, I really want to thank you for taking the time to speak with us. We started with the personal. We ended up with a big picture. I want to bring in now Julie Samuels she's the Executive Director of Tech NYC to provide our closing remarks. Julie?
Thanks, Scarlet. Thanks again so much to Lisa, especially for joining us, to our partners at Cornell Tech, and to Bloomberg for hosting us. It was so great to hear about everything that Lisa has been able to accomplish at General Assembly since she took on the CEO role last summer, especially now at a time when we are in the peak of this crazy pandemic. COVID-19 has even further shown why a company like GA is so important. So much of how we've been able to cope, how we've been able to adapt with this pandemic was made possible by technology. And so many elements of the way we work and live aren't going to go back to any normal. Some of the hardest hit sectors of our economy impacted workers who haven't had access to tech education. People are going to need these 21st century tech skills for these jobs of the future, and General Assembly is leading the charge to provide those opportunities. We're so excited at Tech NYC to count General Assembly as a member. We look forward to following their work into the post-pandemic world and beyond. Thanks again so much to Lisa. Thanks for all of you for tuning in tonight.